Back at it again. It's another edition of the State of Football, Part 19. Unbelievable here. We keep on moving and grooving towards the NFL season. We got college football kickoff, and just 2 days away. The hot topics, the issues you want to hear more about. That's what we do here on the State of Football, brought to you by the NFLDraftBible.com. Make sure you check them out right now. 2021 virtual NFL Draft Bible is now available. We're getting close to over 300 scouting reports, and it's not even September yet, folks. So make sure you get on that. We've got some interesting topics today, boy, oh boy. Rick Saratella here at the Jersey Shore, reporting live each and every day with you on your weekday mornings, 9 a.m. We've extended this show through the season, so please tell a friend, share it, like it, comment, and we look forward to taking this show onto bigger and larger platforms. So make sure you stay tuned for upcoming announcements. Of course, my co-host each and every day, he is John Murphy, VP of Player Personnel for the Toronto Argonauts. Of course, down there in New Orleans today, joining us during the hurricane. John, we appreciate you taking the time here during a semi-stressful situation. Luckily, it hasn't been what the news has forecasted, so we are happy for that, and we hope you guys are all safe there. Of course, Barry Robert Ozer from Magnolia Capital Sports Management. Barry joins us again for the second consecutive day. David Turner. Barry's in Charlotte. We're going across the country to Arizona. Early morning there. David Turner, Maverick Sports Consulting, of course, nearly 2 decades of scouting experience, executive, administrative roles, NFL, CFL, AFL, the list goes on and on. One of the few men who has won back-to-back-to-back championships in the history of sports. So we're lucky to have a variety of opinions, a variety of topics to get into, but none other being the big one coming out of the NBA, which is impacting not only the entire sports world, but the entire world, quite frankly. And so, the shooting of Jacob Blake, disturbing, distraughtful, and really much bigger than sports, right? And so we saw that in the NBA. We are now seeing a season on the brink in the NBA. And, I'm sure the commissioner there was worried about the COVID, but the social justice issues in our country right now are what's at stake. And, we'll start it off, I guess, with the NBA deciding to cancel their games last night. The teams that are still remaining in the playoffs, meeting in the bubble, the Lakers and Clippers, 2 of the favorites to win the championship, actually deciding to just opt out of the season. Let's shut it down. Let's boycott it. There's much bigger issues at hand. The other team still wanting to keep the season alive. The result, LeBron storms off. The Lakers and Clippers follow. Conflicting reports as to whether or not they want to proceed with the season. There will be a meeting, 11 a.m. this morning Eastern, to kind of pick up that conversation. But again, this will now trickle into all the sports. And we saw some MLB games canceled. We saw some MLS games canceled. And, as of this morning, John Murphy just told us here before the air, the Redskins or Washington, that Washington football team has decided to cancel their practice. And we've even seen comments from Jerry Jones prior to this latest unfortunate incident that, he would like to create a resolution with the players where they come to an agreement where it doesn't involve kneeling during the national anthem, to come to some kind of mutual type of stance. You've got other people like the Houston Texans head coach O'Brien saying, absolutely, I'm going to take a kneel with my players. So there's going to be conflicting stances on how they should express themselves. Every organization, John, I'll start it off with you, deals with this differently. First of all, impact and analysis, and where do you want to go with this topic here?
Yeah, I mean, you had an already tenuous circumstance where there was a number of players, both high-profiled and others, that prior to entering the NBA bubble and agreeing to it, were having second, third, fourth, and 54th concerns about, was this the right thing to do? Did they really want to go in, or did they feel like if you went in, it was kind of skirting some of the issues, that everyone was seeing? And so I think now, in all reality, the scheduling of how those games went yesterday, and the fact that it was the Milwaukee Bucks playing the Orlando Magic, and that it was not something that the, in quotes, right players were in charge of, I think that created a ripple effect that you're now seeing and going to see for the 24, 48 hours here is almost, are they upset that the wrong team and the wrong people made that decision? And I think that's something that the players amongst themselves are going to have to deal with, are going to have to let their egos and stuff, get out of the way in order to make proper decisions. And accept the factor that, like, hey, whatever two teams were scheduled to play first in the afternoon, that's just the way that it went. So, if you were the guy that wanted to stage the walkout and you didn't get to do it, and now you're going to take your ball and go home, that's not the message and that's not the reasoning to do it. So I think you're going to, on top of it, have a group of players that clearly can afford to do that. They can afford it publicly, privately, and financially. And then there's another group of guys who showed up there purposely because they need their checks. And they know what's going to happen. If you shut this down now, the owners will have no choice but to completely restructure NBA and NBA salaries for a likely several year period of time. I think you saw it with baseball when Mookie Betts decided he was not going to play. The rest of his teammates, responded by saying, well, if you're out, we're out. And that cost the reason for the Dodgers, and a few other games to be canceled. And I think now here we are, if you play, what will be the circumstance and how will the response come? If you decide to not play, how long can you do that? I think it was very smart of the NBA to come out today and not leave that open-ended. Don't put that on the Celtics and the Raptors players. Don't put that on athletes who need time and a schedule to prepare and have something happen last minute. Or if they had gone forward last minute and you get somebody hurt, you don't want that part, to happen either. So very smart, I think, by the NBA to say, hey, regardless of what happens, the one thing we know is no games on Thursday. And gives everybody a chance to have some breathing room, and don't schedule or worry about a meeting to get a game scheduled. Just worry about the meeting for the bigger picture of what's happening, with things. And I think we'll see the other sports, how do they follow suit? They're all dealing with issues already. Some of them are already away from their families. The NBA guys, their families are actually, I think, have reported to Orlando, but are in the process of going through the quarantine to then be able to, meet up at the end of the week or early next week, with their, husbands and fathers and so on and so forth. So you got a lot of emotion and a lot of, issues there. One of the things that has come out of this already is formally, I think this morning, there is a federal investigation, that's now going to start on the actual incident and the shooting. So we'll see what can the NBA players ask for. They raised $300 million, which is a testimony to those guys, and what they pushed for and what they pressed for. But if you keep asking for things and getting certain things and green lighted certain things, but nothing changes, at some point we're probably going to see a almost complete standstill of professional sports.
Well, it's interesting, as you said, emotions are definitely high, emotions are definitely raw. And to your point, it's easy for LeBron James to sit here and say, hey, let's boycott the season. And credit to him, putting his legacy on the line, right? What another championship title could mean to his credentials. But, he doesn't need the money. And quite frankly, maybe most of these guys don't need the money. But again, we're living in COVID times. Who doesn't want to collect a paycheck with such an uncertainty? what the future holds. And I'll go over to David Turner, who's been waiting patiently at Mav Sports. David, the NBA season is in jeopardy. What are the next steps? Ironically, this occurred 4 years to the day of Colin Kaepernick first taking a knee, and there's no doubt about it. Black Lives Matter voice has been heard, but the consequences or the results and the actions of the police officers have not changed. So, what can the NBA do here? Will they be more effective boycotting the season? Will their voice be heard more? Or do they continue to move on and use their platform as a vehicle to continue to put this message out there?
Well, Rick, I was about to just bring that up with Kaepernick. I mean, Kaepernick at the time when he came, he had a celebrity to him. He did not choose to boycott a season. He did not choose not to do his job. He chose to take the protest to the field and bring social light to a subject that really mattered to him. But he still showed up and did his job. He still showed up and went to work. So he was lucky to have a job, and he knew that at the time. But he also knew that he had a social responsibility to bring and shed light onto this subject. So he found a way to do a silent protest and draw some attention to um, this injustice that goes on around our country. And people had a huge problem with it. Well, now people are talking about, well, if the athletes choose to, postpone a season or forego this or forego that, they're going to have a problem with it. Well, I think, as what part of the training that we do at Maverick Sports Consulting is, what's your end goal? Like John just said, like, what's your end goal? And then work the steps backwards so we can be successful in it. Like, what's the end goal for athletes right now? Is it defunding the police? Is it retraining the police? Is it getting the police with more empathy and understanding, the social injustices that are really built into our system and the systemic racism that really goes on around our country? What's your end goal? And be collective in this goal, because once you have a collective in the goal, then you see a galvanization where then people can move forward and really accomplish something. Like when Martin Luther King Jr. wanted something, it was equal rights, it was the civil rights bill, it was voting for everybody. It was, I mean, he had specific goals that he moved and galvanized the country around and said, we need to end Jim Crow laws, right? It was a specific goal. Let's go do this. So for me, I think that we're too diverse in goals right now across the nation and in this subject, even, that we need to galvanize under specific goals. Like, again, if it is not defunding the police but retraining the police, what I had a problem with when I saw the film, you had four cops again with guns drawn in a situation that didn't look lethal to me. I didn't see a taser, I didn't see pepper spray, I didn't see batons, I didn't see ground fighting techniques, I didn't see anybody engaging them without a weapon. And I'm like, well, I have a lot of friends who are police officers, and they are very good at ground fighting techniques. We've sparred, we've paired off, and had some fun doing some fighting stuff. And they taught me some things on self defense. It's like, why are on these situations and these instances we're seeing guns drawn versus tasers versus other ways to protect both parties here, to protect the police officers that are engaging this man and protect the man that it got engaged. Like, and all the way through this, I'm just seeing lethal techniques, which again is a big problem. If our officers feel the first line of defense is drawing their weapon, a lethal weapon, and engaging an unarmed person, if that's their go-to, we're not training our police correctly and efficiently in ground fighting techniques and in submission techniques. And we go back to the point, and I'm sorry I got off on a little tangent there, but when we go back to the point of what is it that the athletes are looking for, what do they want? Is it just to draw attention to this subject matter? Then the best way to do that is stay on the court, play the games, have your post-game speeches where people are going to listen and hear you. That Doc Rivers speech after the game the other night, I don't know what was more compelling than to hear Doc talk. I mean, I won't even try to quote him because of what he said and how he said it, the pure emotion and hurt in his voice just rang through, and I think would hit anybody who listened to it right in the heart. So I think that will draw more attention. So that's what Kaepernick knew, was by taking a knee at the office on the field was going to bring that attention. It wasn't him holding, foregoing a season and holding a press conference or a rally. He was using a celebrity, and he was using the power of the NFL on the field to get the message out. And if that's your goal, to continue to talk and push this to the forefront, you have no better platform than to continue to play, continue to show up to work, and use that platform for everybody to see what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, and I think the big thing for me is, like, obviously there's a problem. We're drawing attention to it. And for LeBron James, like, I know he had the tweet. It's like, F this, man. I'm pissed off. Well, like, hey, I know you guys raised $300 million, but hey, if you're so pissed off about it, let's start creating solutions. Let's start proposing some stuff. I see The Rock was also very disturbed. He's got presidential aspirations, possibly. Hey, why don't you guys seek out the Department of Justice, William Barr? Let's bring a proposal to the table. Let's bring some kind of, retraining, police reform. You mentioned draw to weapons. How about excessive force? I mean, even if it does get to the point where you have to fire your pistol, 7 rounds, really? I mean, 1 bullet can't do the trick if you need to ground somebody. Like, it's just unbelievable that, I don't know if there's been an arrest made or not. I saw an arrest made. Was it the police officer? I don't know the details of it, but I think my point is, like, hey, King James, you're the leader of the NBA. You're the face, right? So instead of just being PO'd, storming off the court, kind of being a kid on Twitter, like, hey, let's bring some issues to the table. Let's try to create some solutions. And I think that's where the leadership somebody needs to step up. If it's not him, then somebody. Doc Rivers, Chris Webber had a great speech, I thought, emotional felt yesterday as well. But there's no doubt about it. Like John said, at some point this is going to trickle into all the sports, Barry, and we might be on a standstill here on Thursday. I'm not sure any games get played today.
Yeah. Well, listen, everybody has a right to their own individual reaction. If LeBron, I'm not going to judge LeBron's reaction. I think, at the end of the day, my reaction is different than your reaction. I do agree with something David said is, you got to think about what is the goal. At the end of the day, what do you as an individual with a venue want to accomplish? And then work your strategy back from there. Right now, it's just all emotion. And there's no one size fits all. Life's not a yes or a no. And to go back to the and dissect everybody's tweets and everybody's reaction, I'm giving everybody a pass right now because it's an emotional, fast-moving environment we're in. But somebody has to come up with an end goal and work backwards and then show some leadership. And right now, I don't know. Maybe it's Doc. Maybe it's Chris Webber. Maybe it's somebody else, right? But, what we're doing now ain't working. So we got to change something, right?
Yeah, and Chris Paul, head of the union. Good point, David. Another superstar in the NBA. Again, right. We'll find out in about an hour and a half when they do recongregate there in the bubble. But I want to kind of take it back to the NFL spin a little bit here, John, because like I said, we have seen conflicting owners deal with this in various ways. And, Donald Trump, the president of the United States, has by the way, applied more pressure, in terms of Roger Goodell. Kudos to him for changing his stance and coming out and being open and transparent with that, right? He could have went into the basement and tucked his tail and hid, right? And he did the interview with Nate Burleson the other day. But there are guys like Jerry Jones and others who do support Donald Trump's views. And so that creates conflict within the league. And we talked about how getting through the COVID, making sure players are on the same page, united in their stance of keeping it safe protocols. Well, now there's a whole nother X factor that is going to play into these locker rooms.
Yeah, and if you're Jerry Jones, Dak Prescott, Ezekiel Elliott, Mari Cooper, Michael Gallup, Tyron Smith, DeMarcus Lawrence, Jalen Smith, you pick which one of those guys you want to, put on the other, the opposite side of you by, kind of pushing what they're going to perceive as a agenda that's not truly just your own. And we'll see where the rubber meets the road, in that type of situation. I think if you're going to continue to press, the issue, you're going to start getting a lot of force feedback, from guys, because it's showing you that the player's interest is now to not be on the wrong side of the equation. And that equation is not just their financial situation, as much as Barry would hate to hear that. It's, they're not looking at their bottom line the way that they have, for generation, for generations. What these guys don't want to be on. And what you saw yesterday, the whole reason that they took issue with Milwaukee not sharing it, or, hey, you should have paused for 1 minute and had your player rep text all the player reps or do something, is none of these guys want to be on the wrong side of that history, right? None of them want to be the guy that, wasn't, in step the right way when this comes over. And I truly believe that what they're going to decide almost unilaterally and then collectively behind the scenes is that if you pull the plug in North America on professional sports, you will get change. And you will get change because it will now make not common sense, but it'll be about what we've talked about exclusively across the board when it comes to COVID, college football, and other, which is dollars and cents. So when we could have made a lot of these changes and adopted different things and reacted different ways, because common sense would have allowed you to do an interview on Fox or do an interview on the NFL Network. And if Colin Kaepernick had said the completely wrong thing 4 years ago, you could have just deleted the interview and never showed it, never done anything with it. But if you had just given it its due the next day, if you had just allowed him to speak out and do it in a proper format and setting, we would probably be a lot further ahead than we are. And now one guy taking a knee cost him his job. They're now going to come back and basically pull the plug. I believe so. I believe before we see the end, we will see just no pro sports. And the most interesting part about that will then be, how do these major college athletes who have pro aspirations in these same sports, will LSU, Alabama, and other schools play when they are predominantly minority driven as well? Maybe not. Maybe not.
Well, that's interesting stuff there. And, the NFL could be halted before it even begins. We're here at the State of Football, Part 19, brought to you by the NFL Draft Bible, diving into the hot topics and social justice, the impact on sports. If you didn't hear the new Mav Sports podcast, which delves into all sports, not just football, they had Tom Pelissero on yesterday. Make sure you check that out. But, David, I know you do delve into other sports. And, it's somewhat relevant here as the NHL is kind of tone deaf. And they've taken some criticism for not acting or not being proactive yesterday and continuing on with their slate. Do you think we will see any change there in the NHL? Are you concerned about the startup of the NFL? They just finally got this COVID, we thought, under control, 8 days away until they stopped the daily testing. But now a whole nother issue comes to the forefront.
What was interesting to me, Rick, is when they negotiated going to training camp, part of the going to training camp, one of the biggest issues was this social injustice. A lot of players in the NFL didn't want to play until after the election. They wanted to sit out and spend their time campaigning for whatever side they wanted to campaign for. They didn't want to play till after. It wasn't until Roger Goodell and the league made some concessions on, the kneeling at the anthem is okay. No one's getting fined or getting, pressured to stand, or that was what's supposed to happen. The playing of the Black national anthem, all these concessions were to be made in order to get the players to show up to training camp. It wasn't over COVID. These were all about social injustice. And you see that those policies were in the forefront of negotiation. So now that we're seeing a second push, a second wave starting to hit, if you will, then it's going to be interesting to see the reaction around the NFL and what the NFL's reaction to it will be, and maybe some more concessions in further, because they still have to do further negotiations on, like Tom Pelissero said on the show the other night, they don't know what testing is going to be after like September 5th. They have no idea that if testing is going to be every day. And then you saw Buda Baker come out yesterday and say, hey, we need to continue to test every day if we want to play a whole season. Well, that's a big expense for the owners to take on themselves, to continue to test every day and to, put that test forward every day and pay for that. I think training camp, John, you'll probably know this, or Barry, you might know the numbers better than I am. But I think training camp costs the owner $75 million just to test every day during training camp. Now you're telling me you want to do that for the next 6 months or 5 months through the Super Bowl? I mean, that's going to be, oh my gosh, astronomical $300 million investment or something from the owners to do that every day. But the players are saying we need it to stay safe. So I mean, that's going to be a huge negotiation point on the table. I mean, $300 million. I don't care how rich you are; it's still a lot of money. So that's going to be it. When you talk about the college football teams and how they're going to respond to this, the kids want to play. They know the power of football, and in order to enrich their own pockets when they finally graduate and can get paid to up their draft stock, is they want to play, and they want to play to improve their draft stock. Is that the proper mentality we should be carrying right now in a day and time where we have, I mean, just natural disasters happening left and right, from Iowa to Louisiana and what's happening down there, the fires in California? I mean, there's 3 huge natural disasters as we sit here and speak today. And then you want to talk about the social injustice that we're seeing across the country, that people are trying to move that needle off of the systemic racism. And, oh, by the way, we have a pandemic where 180,000 Americans have died via COVID. So, you have all this going on, and you got these players going. You want to talk to NHL? Well, Major League Soccer let one game go yesterday, and they took a lot of heat. They took a lot of heat for letting that one game play and then canceling the rest of them. I don't think leagues should feel the pressure from other leagues on what to do. That's like the 4 of us here. What I shouldn't pressure Rick. I shouldn't pressure John or Barry on what to do in this situation. It's a personal decision. I think each league has to take their own decision and know that that's their chapter in history during these times. Don't feel the pressure on a social issue that you really need to feel on a COVID issue. COVID, yeah, we need to be, in my mind, more uniform in testing and masking and social distancing, because that's the health of everybody. Now, again, a social issue, which needs to be eradicated, don't get me wrong, is an individual choice. And in America, we have an individual choice. You choose to believe what you want to believe. You choose to do what you want to do. That's the beauty of America. So if the NHL is like, hey, we're playing as a league, that's what our players, our owners, and everyone want to do, you can't jump on them for doing it, because now you become gang mentality in the wrong way.
Yeah, and to your point, Dakota, if you want to pop up our guest, everybody is going to deal with this differently. And, the Colts are not practicing today. They're going to take a day to regroup, regather. Meanwhile, I see here in our internal chat room, the Ravens are moving on. We saw the Lions yesterday stand down from practice. The Washington football team will not practice today. Now, they've got other issues that they're dealing with as well, and we don't have time to dive into that. But, David, I will mention FDA approved yesterday at home COVID testing, 24-hour results as cheap as $5 per test. Could be a game changer to help ease those financial concerns about year-round daily testing. We'll dive more into that topic. We welcome in our guest for today is Eric Edholm from Yahoo Sports. He does a great job over there, one of the best in the business in covering the NFL draft and also the NFL for many, many years. Eric, we're injecting you into deep conversation here and a lot of different things we want to cover, but obviously the big topic that we're all waking up to this morning is the social injustice, how it's trickled into pro sports, and now suddenly the NBA on the brink. We don't know if we'll get a full season. Quite frankly, we're not even sure if we'll get the start of an NFL season on time. We thought it might be the COVID, but here comes 2020, full steam ahead.
Yeah, it's a lot to digest and it's a lot to sink in. I was off Twitter last night. I just sort of wanted to sit back and think, what are the big picture ramifications here? How is this going to work? I think it's a fair question to ask. Do you think this will accomplish the goal? And if so, how? I mean, those are the biggest sort of, vague, nebulous questions you can ask. And I'm sorry for this light pouring in on my face here. The sun is hitting at a certain angle this morning.
But, you look beautiful.
Oh, well, thanks. That's what I was looking for. But it really is fascinating to see what the NFL's next step will be, right? Because there's obviously a lag time. There's no preseason games. We've got some time before the start of the season. Our team's going to be compelled to change the way they do anything here. Are they gonna protest playing? If Pat Mahomes says I'm not walking out there on opening night, well, now you got a problem. So do I think that's going to happen? No, I'm just using him as an example as one of the young stars of the league, on the team that's scheduled to play first. So everything's up in the air right now. It feels sort of like a strange and fascinating flashpoint in sports history.
No doubt about it. I'm going to go back over to Barry Robert Ozer here real quick because, Barry, we talked about the lack of padded practices, right? There's only going to be 14 padded practices. Now you see teams taking days off, maybe multiple days. Suddenly 14 days become 10 days. Could this be a competitive advantage or disadvantage for the teams that decide to, plow through like the Ravens we see today, and teams that say, hey, you know what? We're going to take a few days, think about this, reset, reload. There's not a lot of time left here until the kickoff. I think we're just less than 2 weeks away.
Yeah, I don't know. At the end of the day, what was that Yogi Berra quote? Sports is 100% mental, not 10% physical. So, I think that, we just be lucky to have a full season and lucky to have a safe season, not only safe from COVID, but safe from avoidable injuries, And so my take on it is what it is. Let's just do the best we can and move on. And hopefully we have a productive season.
All right, the State of Football, Part 19 here. We'll be back at it again tomorrow, 9 to 10 a.m. Eastern, picking up on some of these hot topics. Believe me, it's not the first and it's not the last that you'll be hearing about this. We'll be discussing it, probably each and every day as we dive into the season. But we do have Eric Edholm from Yahoo Sports, his latest article breaking down some of his impact rookies for the upcoming season. Eric, so who are some of those young, promising rookies that are catching your eye on early on here?
Have you guys heard of Joe Burrow? He's good, man. No. Okay. I had to throw him on the list, right? I mean, as cute and clever as we want to be, as deep digging as we want to be as well, you have to include the obvious names. And Burrow was my only quarterback choice just because I don't know when Tua Tagovailoa or Justin Herbert are going to get on the field. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, everyone's been buzzing about him, had to have him on there. But receiver was the position where I really had to sit there and say, I don't know, here are 15 or 18 rookies who could contribute in their first year. Which 3 or 4 are really going to be the standout guys? And one name that I kept hearing so much buzz about the last couple of weeks, talking to people around the league, and obviously, that includes people in Indianapolis, is Michael Pittman Jr. If you think about what Phillip Rivers worked so well with in San Diego and LA, it was those big, long frame receivers. Those are the guys that ended up being his most trusted guys. Pittman is really that style of player, right? You think of, he's even a longer version than some of the guys they have, maybe not a Vincent Jackson type, but kind of that athletic, go get it, 50-50 ball type of guy. And so Colts don't really have another guy on the roster like that. He had to be on my list for that very reason. And with all the offensive tackles, I had to sort of pick and choose. But I'd be shocked if Mekhi Becton isn't eye-opening in year one. Will there be mistakes? Yes. But with, Sam Darnold entering such a crucial season and the offensive line, such a problem there last year, I just feel like he's got to be an upgrade, even with, a couple lumps that he'll take along the way. He's one of the more fascinating studies I think we'll have among the first-year players this year.
Yeah, Mekhi Becton, they're going to need him to step up in a big way. I think the interesting guy that you did mention there to me, and I saw John nodding, so I'll go over to him, the Pittman factor, because now with a healthy T.Y. Hilton on the other side, Paris Campbell there in the slot, suddenly Phillip Rivers has got some weapons to throw to. And I believe Jonathan Taylor will be the NFL Rookie of the Year. So you inject him into the equation, John. I think the 1 year retirement of Andrew Luck was just the other day. Prior to that announcement, I had the Colts pegged as my AFC team to make it to the Super Bowl last year. Does this injection of rookies with the addition of Phillip Rivers put them in the mix?
I think they're going to be in the mix. It's just that's a division where, minus the Jacksonville Coughlins, anybody else can not only win it, but then make a deep run. Because you could make a picture of seeing Tannehill grow in the second year of that offense. You could see the Colts with the players that they have and the roster and the depth of their roster, giving them possibilities. Two different backs, like it or not, they at least then have Brissett, backing up Rivers now. So they have depth there. Their offensive line, is one of, if not the best, not only in their division, but in the AFC or the NFL as a whole. And now you're not asking Rivers to do what he was doing in the prime of his career. You're asking like a little bit of a metamorphosis on his behalf, using the run game. They have tight end. They have multiple receivers now, so he's really just there. If you can run the ship and give him that veteran leadership and complete the balls, it's not the turnovers. With the Colts, it was some of the balls that Brissett threw last year. You just can't win if you're not completing balls that should be almost 100%, and he was not anywhere near that. On too many crucial plays that then gave them much longer down and distance, took a lot of the run action out of their offense. At times. So I think that the reason that you always like guys like Pittman is that we're not asking that guy to go out there and be a number one, right? It's not a John Madden, or a fantasy football draft. We're talking about who can be the best guy in the scheme, how they're going to use him. And you could see that guy going 700-800 yards, 5, 6, 7 touchdowns and giving them something they haven't had. And now you're going to leave Doyle in goal line and intermediate situations in the middle of the field by himself. There's a real likelihood there that they have a dynamic offense to go along with the defense that they have. If they get any kind of pass rush and their improvements they've tried to make in the secondary bounce back in their scheme, the Colts could be a real contender to be playing really late, in the season. But it's a very interesting division. Because, like I said, you have the Jacksonville Coughlins, you have, what's going on with Houston and, whether he takes a knee or not with them. If O'Brien doesn't win some games this year, they're going to take a knee and move him out the door, with their stuff. And then you have the Titans who are sitting there front and center who had the Chiefs right where they wanted them until they didn't. So that's a really, I think, an interesting division, to look at because I think you have three teams that have justifiable reasons to believe they can get to double-digit wins, but all three of them have had seasons the last couple of years that have ended disappointingly.
And, the Chiefs, Eric mentioned Clyde Edwards-Helaire, another impact player, the rich getting richer there. David, I know you had a chance to see Michael Pittman there at the Senior Bowl. Any thoughts on Pittman and the rookies that Eric mentioned?
Well, no, I think the receivers are like coming into the draft when we did our live draft coverage. I thought the receivers were some of the deepest group we had. I think in one of the shows I even said you'll see a third or a fourth round pick at receiver wind up being or outshining some of the first round picks maybe because it's just such a deep class and so many guys got pushed down. And again, Pittman, it reminds me when I was at the Raiders, we used to have to play San Diego when they were at the height of their career, and they had a double weapons. People talk about Vincent Jackson so much, but Floyd gave us trouble because he could stretch the field and do some things. And then the catch radiuses on these guys were so forgiving for Phillip Rivers because these guys could bend, they can react, they can pluck the ball and elevate. They could get behind. I mean, their catch radiuses were huge, being these big guys. And so that was something that always gave us fits at the Raiders. I mean, we had good DBs, but I mean, when they had so many weapons for him to throw to, and you never wanted to give him a fourth minute or a fourth quarter 2-minute offense back in those days. I mean, I really think my 5-year run at the Raiders, I think we lost 6 games in the fourth quarter to Phillip Rivers when we had the freaking lead. Okay, so I mean, this is a man who can sling the ball, and last year you saw it too. I mean, the Chargers didn't get a lot of press last year, but man, they were winning some games and they were competitive in a lot of their games. And Phillip Rivers has still got the arm and ability to do everything. So, I really like what they're doing with Pittman and how they're building. Obviously, I got great ties to that building in Indy with Ed Dodds being there. Him and I were at the Raiders together for a few years, and I have nothing but admiration for him and the whole staff over there and what they're building. They really are building a team the right way. I mean, as a scout, as a personnel guy, watching their moves, their depth. I mean, Murphy, you and I, everybody on this can appreciate they're building for the long haul. They're building the right way. And, they're taking care of their cap and making sure they're drafting consistently the right way. So, I mean, you'll see Ed Dodds as a general manager here within a year or two. Might even be at the Texans next year, if they blow up that thing down there. But I think the rookies this year, from what I've seen at home on the couch, I haven't been able to get to camps like I usually do. But there are some impressive rookies. I think the one thing without preseason games, and at this point only having about 5 or 6 padded practices, you don't know what you have in your rookies, especially the big guys, the linebackers, the guys that it counts on hitting and tackling. You just don't know what you have in them yet. And that was something Policero brought up in the podcast yesterday, was like, there's no trade bait out there right now. No one's trying to trade. There's not a lot of trade talk, especially when you're under 2 weeks to cut. You often see some trades at this time to get rid of some players to make statements and lock. Yeah. But you don't know your depth. And then with the new practice squad rules, having 16 guys on practice squad and some of them can be veterans, it's going to be interesting to see how teams cut. Because I really think, I made this statement on the podcast, Rick, I really think some teams are going to cut veterans, trying to move them to depth down to the practice squad and keep younger players up to help on salary cap this year, in anticipation that they're going to have to activate some of these veterans and move them up and do things. The salary cap is going to be very tricky to maneuver this year, and I think some of the veterans are going to be asked to be moved to the practice squad, and they're going to have to swallow ego to do it, right, John? Because if they don't swallow ego to do it, they're going to be on the workout circuit, which we don't know what the workout circuit is going to look like.
Right.
So it's a very complex moving part system this year in the NFL with all this stuff going on.
For sure. That's going to get a little bit dicey. Now, we mentioned a lot about the wide receivers. Traditionally, that's had the biggest bust factor, but it's also been, in my opinion, the hardest position to transition to at the next level. And so, that's typical in most years, but I think this has been the toughest rookie season for quarterbacks because they didn't get the offseason OTAs. They didn't get the rookie mini camps. They didn't get the padded practices. I mean, these guys are so far behind. And Barry, you heard Eric say Joe Burrow, he's pretty good. We know he's going to start.
Yeah.
But, I don't know if you saw the last edition of Hard Knocks. I mean, it looks like Tyrod Taylor has got that Chargers starting job going into the season on lockdown. I do think we'll see Justin Herbert at some point. I don't think he's going to start right off the bat. Tua Tagovailoa has been cleared for full contact. So I think at this point, he might even have a better chance than Herbert to start down there in Miami. Do you see any of these rookies outside of Burrow starting day one?
Absolutely. Absolutely. They all have a shot, right? And, especially to mention what Eric said, is if they've got a good line, they've got a good offensive line and they get that extra split second, a rookie is going to be okay if he's got, a good line. And so I think that, there's going to be some sleepers. There's going to be some surprises. And I think that there might even be a situation where a team, if this is a condensed season or a weird season, might put a rookie in there to get him ready for the next season.
All right, we are winding down to the nitty gritty. We're lucky to have Eric Edholm, our special guest from Yahoo Sports here. Eric, if you're not following him on Twitter, make sure you do that. But also check out the archives that he's compiling, because some of this stuff is going to be very valuable leading up to the draft. You've done a handful of in-depth player profiles. You've done a handful of interviews. Give the folks at home a taste of some of the things you've already done. And what's next in line? What's on the lookout here? What should we be keeping our eye on next from you?
Yeah, no, I mean, obviously there's only so much really going on at this point, and which is too bad for a lot of us who are, have been waiting all summer for a football season. But, I'm just so fascinated, obviously, what the effect is going to be on, the Pac-12 and the Big Ten, assuming the other major conferences do play in college football. How are those seniors' draft stocks going to be affected? How does a Rondale Moore look to an NFL scout when they've only got 180 snaps on him over the past year plus? So these are big scouting questions a lot of times that we only have a handful of examples of that we can pluck from the past. So going to continue to kind of look back at examples like that. Also hoping to talk to some of the players who've already opted out. Some of the guys who are, kind of in that, not that first round range, the ones who are a little bit below the radar, like a Jay Tufele from USC or somebody like that, who, with a big year this year could have ended up in that first round discussion. We don't know. Is he going to be there? Is he going to be able to work out and show scouts that kind of talent? So, that's a fascinating thing. Obviously, some of the more established guys, I think, like a Micah Parsons obviously has nothing to worry about. Maybe somebody like Rashawn Slater has no worries because it's not as deep a class of tackles this year. So again, just trying to figure out from a college perspective what the effect of a lost season for some is going to have. Are the ones who get to play getting that big of an advantage over the ones who don't? I don't know. That's certainly something we have to look at and consider.
No, it's an interesting situation worth monitoring. And, you mentioned the players who have opted out. Some of them have not declared their future intentions. So we don't know if they're going pro or returning back. And, a lot of college head coaches are going to be doing that re-recruiting, right? Bringing them back. And I think part of what Jim Harbaugh did there in Michigan, we talked about it on yesterday's show with the Michigan Combine in October. Well, it keeps those players in the building and keeps them around for a couple extra weeks, if not months. Like, hey, you don't need to go to these big fancy training facilities and start your combine prep. You can do it right here. We'll have a combine for you. In the meantime, some of those guys, to your point, Eric, those day 2, day 3, borderline free agent guys, it gives him time to re-recruit, keep those guys in good standing and get some of these guys to come back and play 2021, whether that's in the spring or fall. We still don't know. But we do appreciate you hopping on here and giving us a few minutes of your time. I know you're a very busy man. We're going to go over to David Turner for a parting shot, Maverick Sports Consulting. Of course, the podcast yesterday with Tom Pelissaro, record number of downloads already. I know it's burning up there, David. So give the folks at home a glimpse of everything you've got going on and what to expect coming up here. I know there's something going on tomorrow, I believe.
Yeah, boom. Tomorrow's Linebackers, baby. We're going Friday night scout school. We're doing linebackers. If you like to hit, you better bring it. So, be there or don't even tell me you're a football fan. Because at this point, if you don't like grading linebackers and watching linebacker tape like we're going to do tomorrow night, who the hell are you? Like, you're fluff. And I don't need fluff in my classroom. So what we're going to do is we're going to break down, talk about linebackers, not only blitzing, run defense, but pass defense. We're going to take you through all of what their responsibilities and things are. We got great tape with KJ Wright and a bunch of people lined up for it. So you're going to see Edmonds and stuff. We're going to go from athletic to thumpers, and you're going to see what's going on tomorrow night, Friday night scout school. You can sign up a la carte. I prefer, obviously, to sign up for the season pass because we're only 7 weeks into a 25-week schedule, and you got plenty of on the back end to learn Offense will be starting soon. Next week we go into safeties and I think corners, and then boom, we're into the offense, pass schemes, and everything. So sign up for Friday Night Scout School. Obviously, download, listen to the podcast. We hit some very good subjects over the first few weeks. We talked about the CFL cancellation. We've talked about recruiting with the Fighting Illini's own James Kirkland, and got it from the horse's mouth on what parents need to know when their sons or daughters are getting recruited to be able to get to a big school and a big program. And then obviously we had Tom Pelissero. We talked really in depth a lot about NFL, and we went into the NBA, talked about them a little bit, and then social injustice again on our podcast just yesterday. So again, I thank you, Rick, for everything you do for Mavericks and continue to pump us. But we're all about the business of football. So if you or sports in general, to be honest with you, if you want to talk sports and the business of it and the aspects of business, come check out MaverickSportsConsulting.com.
Well, we appreciate you waking up there in that early morning out there in Arizona and joining us here and lending your knowledge to the State of Football panel. Of course, Barry Robert Ozer is no stranger to the show. Magnolia Capital Partners. Barry, what's cooking for you in your world?
Well, I'm just looking forward to, getting to work for the rest of the day. And I got a little golf outing planned for later today. So hopefully I get that in. But, listen, there's a lot going on. And, what's great about this country is everyone can make their own individual choice. And whether you agree with them or not, you can support their decisions. So to all those athletes out there, make the choice that's best for you and the causes that you support. And, I'll be behind you.
All right, very good. And, of course, last but certainly not least, down there in New Orleans on the hurricane watch, we're hoping and praying for you there, John. We'll be back tomorrow with another all-star panel and continue to discuss the hot topics that people want to hear us debate.
Yeah, I'm sure there'll be some people in southwest of where I am and over toward Texas that are definitely dealing with this for several days and weeks to come. And as someone who come 2 more days, it'll actually be the 15th anniversary of Hurricane Katrina. Will be the end of this week and weekend. So obviously it's something that someone else is now having literally invade their backyards. And I think that when it comes to what we're hearing and seeing, again, we've mentioned it with the COVID, we've mentioned it with student athletes, and now I'm going to mention it to fans about guys who are making a lot of money. You obviously support them, but listen, don't be so fast to jump online and whether it's LeBron James or Chris Paul today or your favorite football player or Mookie Betts or other, be a little careful to just listen to their standpoint, listen to where they're coming from, because the one thing all of us would have in common, when it comes to watching things like that, is any of those guys I just mentioned could be the person that was on the receiving end of the wrong part of justice and the wrong part of the injustice we've seen. Unfortunately, or fortunately for us, none of us, you don't see anybody that looks like us on the wrong end of it, right? So I think that the number one thing you can do when you're in that situation is be a little more careful to listen, a little more careful to allow people, to have the response that they're having and to feel the anger and the excitement and the nervousness that they do. And the final thing we'll leave with is, at least today, we came out with one positive in the sports world, which is they did find Mackenzie Alexander's father alive.
Oh, they did?
Oh, yeah, wow.
So that is a huge benefit.
Wow.
Hopefully, as we mentioned yesterday, the key, again, we followed it up right now, is, hopefully, again, there'll be some empathy, as David Turner posted, here on the side, toward what Mackenzie was thinking, like I said, on his way home, when he arrived, and maybe the person, that he encountered might have wanted to state things a little differently or say things a little bit calmer to him. But, we know that Mackenzie made an error in judgment, but we're hopeful that the first part of it turned out well and that, at some point he can apologize for his actions and get back to his own life.
Oh, great news. I did
awesome.
not hear that. Yeah.
Thanks for letting
Way
us
to
know.
end it on a high note. We'll be back tomorrow tackling more hot topics here on your new home for morning football talk. Of course, I want to thank all my guests, Eric Edholm, Yahoo Sports, Barry Robert Ozer, Magnolia Capital Partners, David Turner, Maverick Sports Consulting, of course, my sidekick each and every day here on the State of Football, John Murphy. For Rick Saratella signing off. We'll catch you tomorrow, 9 a.m. Eastern, everybody.